On tonight's show, we have ESPN Sportscaster, author and teacher, and Montgomery.
And now for your host,
KoolKard. What's going on? Hold on, wait, I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. Oh, I see what's happening. There we go. Let's get that out of there. Okay. I had like YouTube playing at the same time. Excuse that. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the KoolKard Show, episode 269. I am your host, KoolKard. Thank you guys for tuning in. Last week, I had a special edition of the show. I had an in-studio edition of my show. I had 3 guests. I got to basically interview them on site at TST Studios out here in Atlanta, Georgia. So it was great experience. So more to come with that. You may see more of that. But tonight, we're back to normal. We're back here in the dungeon, in the basement, kicking it again. But the guests, they do not stop. All right. I got the guests coming back on the show, repeats coming on the show just to bring you the value. This is what I do. I do it for you. I cannot do it without you. I say that all the time. And I mean it, all right? All right, tonight, we have a sportscaster. We have a teacher. We have an author. She's been a referee. She's done a million things over. She's living a spectacular life. She goes by the name of Ann Montgomery. And I can't wait to have this conversation because she is a wealth of knowledge. She has done so much and still doing so much. I'm telling you, you just stick around and listen to her story. It's going to be phenomenal. All right, so without further ado, Ann Montgomery, y'all, let's kick it. And welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Kool. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yes, indeed. I can't wait to get into this conversation. I know it's going to be great. Man, you have done so much, and I can't wait to dive in. I really can't. I just like to tell you, I like to humanize the conversation. All right, so I want to get to know you as Ann, not the sportscaster, first. But we'll get into all of that. But I definitely want to just get a backstory so everybody can get a feel for where you've come from so they can understand where you are now. And also, before I start the show, I like to pray before every conversation. I have to ask, are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Let's get it. Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, we just thank you for this moment, for this time and place. We thank you for Ann's availability to come on the show. Heavenly Father, Jesus, and just be able to share her stories and share her life, Heavenly Father Jesus, and her aspirations, her dreams, her goals, and just everything that she's doing, Heavenly Father Jesus, with the community. Lord Jesus, we just thank you for life, love, happiness, positivity. Heavenly Father Jesus, we just want to give you all the victory, all the glory, all the love, all the praise. And we pray and ask that you carry this conversation. In your name we pray. Amen. Yes. So, Ann, sportscaster, ESPN. I got a million questions. I'm pretty sure anybody that speaks to you has a million questions about ESPN. But that's not all we're going to talk about because you do so much. My God, we were talking before the show. You tell me that you dive with the sharks. I really got questions about that. I'm a little scared about it. So I got questions.
Oh, you should be scared of sharks. Come on.
Listen, I don't know. If you grow up and that's all you know, I'm not saying I can't overcome it. That's why I got questions for you, and you got to help me out here. So
I will be happy to help you with your shark phobia. Don't worry.
Please do that. Yes. But yeah, I want to kind of get to know you, Ann. I want to know where you come from. How'd you get into sportscasting, refereeing, writing books, all that you do? Like, where did it start? Where did your passion lie when you were a child growing up, and how did this all begin?
Like a lot of people that end up in sports broadcasting, I was an athlete. I wasn't a good one. I was an ice dancer, and I know you're going to have viewers who go, "That's not a real sport," but yes, it is. You get sweaty when you ice dance, and so I grew up skating, and even though I wasn't very good, I was like a lot of young athletes who all think they're going to be pros or have gold medals in the Olympics, and that was never going to happen because I was way too big and not that good a skater. However, it gave me a love of it gave me that feeling that you get when you want to achieve something in the sports world. And I know anybody who's ever played a sport or participated in one, especially when you're young, you have these delusions of grandeur. So I also hung around with hockey players because when the figure skaters weren't on the ice, the hockey players were. In fact, today I'd be a hockey player, but I'm going to be 70 in March. And bottom line is I was young before Title IX, and I didn't have that opportunity.
Oh,
So yeah, young girls don't understand what it was like back in olden times when girls really didn't have all the same opportunities they have today.
yeah.
But I was very fortunate that I was in a class in high school that was we had like a radio station, and every morning we would do the announcements. And we had music, and it was a big deal. It was a half-hour homeroom, and one day one of the hockey players handed me an announcement because he knew I was on the broadcast crew. And he said, "Would you read this morning?" And I said, "Sure." And I went in there because we were supposed to keep all the stories in a group. I pulled all the sports stories out of the basket. And 5 minutes before the show, the guys go, "Where are all the sports stories?" And I said, "Oh, I have them. I'm going to read the sports today." And they said, "You can't do that. You're a girl." And,
Oh, wow.
and so now we all get in a fight. And the teacher comes in and he goes, "What's the problem? You guys have 5 minutes to get on the air." They said, "Well, Annie wants to read the sports." And I said, "If Annie wants to read the sports, she can. So let's go. We got a show to do." So they were really mad. And I did the same thing the next day just to piss them off. And I started doing it every day. And after a while, people started coaches and kids started handing me sports announcements. So the guys decided I needed theme music, and they started playing Mission Impossible.
Wow.
Right before it went on, they'd go, "Dun, dun, dun, dun." That was my theme song. And then they started calling me Big Ann. Here's Big Ann with the sports. And they did that, I think, to offend me. But I loved it. I really did. And so when my mother walked up to me beginning of senior year, she goes, "Okay, you have to pick a college. What do you want to be when you grow up?" I went, "A sportscaster." And she looked at me and she said, "Don't be ridiculous. I'm trying to have a serious conversation with you." I said, "That's what I want to be." Well, of course, she told me I was crazy. And when I went to college, to Miami of Ohio, great school, still not sure how I got in, but they kept saying, "You can't be a sportscaster. You're a girl." Got to senior year, and they had this
People
sports.
in college were telling you the same thing?
Oh yeah. I went to Miami of Ohio, which was a big sports school, still is. And they decided to have a sports show on the local PBS station, and they said, "You want to co-host the show?" I said, "Of course I do." So there was a guy, and we co-hosted the show. But what I didn't realize is that when I went out to try to interview the football coach and the basketball coach and the baseball coach, they refused to speak to me.
Really?
They were not going to be interviewed by a girl. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? So I then realized that there are many more sports on a college campus than football, baseball, and basketball. We had tennis, we had ice hockey, we had gymnastics, we had swimming, we had all these other sports that no one ever paid any attention to. And so when I went up to them to do stories, they were like, "Oh yeah, great, come on out and interview us." So I did all the other sports.
So
But of
basically,
course,
so you did the sports that really didn't get the publicity, didn't get that attention, right? So they were
right. And
they
they were delighted. They didn't care that I was a girl. They were just thrilled to get attention. And then I got out of college, and everybody was right. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't even get an interview.
Hold on. Let me stop you.
Women just
Let me
didn't
ask you.
Yeah.
Why is that though? It's the hardest thing because I was a communications major, right? And I majored in like communications / broadcasting. Coming out of school, it was like everybody told me, you have to know somebody. You have to know somebody. They're not gonna
That's not
let you
true.
door. But why is it hard though? Why?
Well, okay, it was hard for me because it was the late 70s. There were very few women, and the women who did this were like Phyllis George, who was Miss America.
Okay.
And it wasn't her fault, but she really didn't. She looked pretty, and we still have some of that going on, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is they had a few women sports writers, but they had almost no women on television. And so when I kept saying I wanted to do that, people told me I was nuts. And it's funny, in life, you hit little strange things change everything. And for me, it was, I moved to Washington, D.C. After college and couldn't get a job and ended up working in a bar in Georgetown, which was wonderfully fun. And it was the 80s, right? Late 70s, early 80s. And I couldn't get a job. I couldn't even get an interview. So I just was a waitress. And then one night I went to a Washington Capitals game with my aunt, and we were sitting there, and she had a date, and the guy was an amateur ice hockey official, meaning he did little kids games and maybe high school and whatever else they did. And he was bemoaning the fact that there weren't enough officials. And my aunt went, "Oh, Annie skates. She could be a referee." And I went, "Yeah, sure, I'll be a referee. What do I care? I grew up with hockey, right?" Um, and so I took the test, and I read after reading the book, went to a little clinic, and they scheduled me for my first game, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I think I got home from the bar at like 3.
Oh my God.
I don't know if you know anything about hockey skates or figure skates, but they are different. They're vastly different. And I didn't know this. Okay. I spent my life on figure skates, and I put those hockey skates on first time they'd ever been on my feet. And I went out on the ice. I got the puck. I'm ready. And this is like 6-year-olds. These are the little kids with their jerseys to their ankles, and they're all sawed off, and their helmets that are like too big and they're tilted, right? And these little kids are waiting for me, and I get out there and I lean over to take that first face off, and I fell
Oh,
because
yeah.
hockey skates don't have toe picks.
No,
And
they don't.
oh yes, there I am lying on the ice, really embarrassed, and I tried to get up. I dug my toe pick, which it wasn't there, into the ice, and I fell again. And it took me 2 times to get up. And I'm standing there. I remember nothing about the rest of the game, absolutely nothing. But I do remember the ride home that day. And I realized that I just didn't know enough about sports to be a sportscaster. It didn't matter that I wanted to be one. It mattered that I didn't know enough about the games that I never been able to play. So I decided to take 5 years and officiate football, baseball, ice hockey, soccer, and basketball, amateur, of course.
That's smart.
And yeah, and I figured after the 5 years I would understand the games.
Yeah.
Because I challenge anybody who thinks they know the game to take the test. I mean, I ended up officiating for 40 years. Every year I had to take national exams so that I could officiate high school ball, right? And
Mm.
but coaches don't have to do that. Players don't have to do that. So after those first 5 years, working ball games, sometimes 2 sports a season, um, I figured that some forward-thinking news director would think I knew what I was talking about and give me a job, and that is exactly what happened.
Wow. So coming from that and you're refereeing, so so after, okay, you got your start with refereeing, and then sportscasting. How did that come? But then when you were sportscasting, were you still like side hustling refereeing?
Oh, okay. The weird thing is, I always believed that I would quit officiating once I got into television,
Mm-hmm.
but I got hooked on it, and I did it. I called my last football game in 2019. Only because I've been hit so many times. I have so many broken bones. Everything's been MRI'd and X-rayed and
Oh my
surgically repaired
God. People
that I
like kids
out of
running
the way. And
into you?
huh?
The kids running into you?
Oh, sure. People don't understand how often officials get hurt. And yeah, I mean, I broke my back in a game. I broke my leg in a baseball game. It's endless. And so when I was just about 65, I realized I couldn't get out of the way anymore.
No.
But the bottom line is I didn't quit after I got into television. And the way that happened, that was another weird little thing that occurred. I was working at the bar, and there was a married couple that I think they worked at the CBS affiliate in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and they were producing an hour-long special called Long Shots. And they wanted to do stories on 4 people that had dreams, that wanted to be something that they weren't. And they had a woman who wanted to be a boxer. Back then there were no women boxers. They had a guy who was a truck driver who wanted to be a country singer. And they came into the bar one night and they go, "Annie, we'd like to have you be part of the show." And so they put me on their show. And what that meant was they shot me at the restaurant. They came to a baseball game. They came to a hockey game. I was a model, not the kind you think. I was the one that they put in a hard hat with a tool belt. Okay.
Mm.
So, but they didn't get that. And they set up this fashion model shoot for me. And then they put me on their set, and they had me do a broadcast. And there was a 15-minute story of my life that aired in Washington, D.C. I had a copy of that tape. And so I started using it because honestly, I'd only been on TV in college.
Right.
And at this point, I mean, it took me till I was 28 to get my first job. So I'd been out of college for what, 6 years
Yeah.
by the time I got a job. So if they hadn't done that video on me, I don't think I would have gotten a job because it made me look really good. So yeah, I got a call. I applied. Back then there was no internet. I know, children, that's shocking, but there was no internet. And I applied to want ads in the back of a magazine called Broadcasting Magazine. And the thing is, you'd apply, they'd go Sportscaster wanted, and they'd say apply to box 379. You didn't know where it was. All you did was send your tape and a resume. And a guy called me one day and said, we'd like you to be our sports director. I'm like, really? He goes, yes, come to Columbus, Georgia. You've got 2 weeks. Well, here was the problem with my life up to that point. I'd never been on live TV. I had no idea how to be a sports director. I had no idea how to do a live broadcast. And it was horrible because my first night on the air, here I am in this, I've been there 2 days, 3 days. And in the olden days, you know what a teleprompter is, right? Mm-hmm. In the old days, a teleprompter used carbon paper, another antiquated thing, where you would type in an old-fashioned typewriter and 6 copies would be made at the same time. And then I didn't know that you're supposed to, those copies should go to the producer, the director, the anchors. I'm supposed to have one. Somebody came and took them off my desk. I didn't think a thing of them. And I went up there on the first night. I didn't have the scripts in my hand. And I didn't understand that I had typed them wrong. Instead of just typing them on the right side of the paper, I typed them from one end to the other like you would a regular piece of paper. And that meant that all of my sentences were cut in half. Oh, and I didn't have a copy. I didn't have a copy of them in my hands. I didn't know I was supposed to do that either. This was like a car accident. I don't remember. I am live on the air.
You went blank?
I do, and I remember the other anchor trying to shove his scripts at me, but I didn't know what he was trying to do. The worst thing was, I was sure I was going to get fired. I didn't. I can't believe they didn't fire me. And then that night, my mother's best friend was in Georgia, was in Atlanta, and happened to see me on the local news. And she told my mother, and my mother wouldn't see me on TV for years. She told my mother I was horrible, and I was. I didn't. So I encourage people that want to be broadcasters to go 1,000 miles from anyone you know, so you can make mistakes in front of strangers.
Wow. So, I mean, do you have, I don't want you to show it, but I'm saying, do you have a copy of that? Do you still have that?
Oh, gosh, no.
So,
I never looked at it.
So what did it look? Oh, you never watched it back or anything?
No, but after, I was very, very fortunate that at several of the TV stations I worked for, I would work for 5. I had partners who were very kind to me. 2 men specifically, one in Rochester, New York, and one in Columbus, Georgia, that got passed over for me. They had experience, but they hired me. And so they didn't get the job they wanted, but they were kind and they taught me how to be a sportscaster. And I will be forever grateful for both of them. Because I don't know how I would have learned. I mean, when you're in a very small market like Columbus, you shoot your own video. Everything you do yourself. Yeah. And the higher up you go, the less you do. So I didn't know anything. I had to learn on the fly, and it was hard. And I made a lot of mistakes. I was surprised they didn't fire me. But there were other people that helped me in the newsroom. And when I said, I admitted, I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I can talk all about rules and how games should be run, but I don't know how to do a sportscast. Oops, I forgot that part.
Wow. So you were reporting on just sports in general on the news, right? Okay.
Yeah, evening news. So whatever was going on in town, and depending on the town I was in, by the time I got to Phoenix, I was the beat reporter for the Arizona Cardinals. So I traveled with the team. Okay. And went to all their games, and on any given night, my job might be, go cover the Lakers and the Suns. Bummer, tough night, right? So, yeah, I don't think there are very few sports I haven't covered at this point.
So that's why I saw the video I'm going to play it. You mentioned something about you're used to being out and about traveling, and then at ESPN, you're just in the studio. You don't get to travel. It's kind of.
I was a prisoner. They wouldn't let me leave.
Oh my God. So how long after that did ESPN come knocking, and how did that opportunity present itself?
I was in Phoenix for 2 years. And then my agent called one day and said, ESPN saw you on the air. Somebody from ESPN did, and they'd like to hire you. That's how it happened. I didn't do anything. But I do know that at that point they were trying to get women. Suddenly the government came out and said, you can't have a whole newsroom full of white men. You can't. And if that hadn't been the case, if people hadn't started thinking that way, I never would have gotten a job. Quite honestly, they wouldn't have allowed me to be an umpire or a football official either. I forced my way into all these places because basically ESPN, I think, felt like they needed women, but they really weren't very nice to any of us. They were kind of dicks. And I don't miss ESPN at all. It wasn't any fun. I like to go out and do things, and I like to write. Here's something. I taught sports reporting at ASU, Arizona State University, very briefly, and I tried to explain to them the most important skill to being a sportscaster is what?
Is it writing?
Yes, thank you very much. Most people don't get that. You have to know how to write. You have to know how to tell a story. Okay, and their attitude is they think either we make it up as we go. You can't do that in an anchor kind of show because the director needs to know what you're doing. The producer needs to know what you're doing. It's not like play-by-play or color that are, you don't have scripts. Yeah. So you have to write your scripts and you have to be able to tell a story. It is the most important thing. So
to this day, that's what they do. They write their scripts.
Of course.
Never knew
when
that.
You get to SportsCenter, you might have 30 stories in a broadcast and 2 anchors are there, and when you get there, the producer hands you a script that says you're doing these 15 stories, and then it's your job to research them and write them.
Oh wow! So how does it go when it's like I want to get to that clip too, and then we'll continue this. But I got one question before I do that. So say like at the end of a game, like SVP, right? Stan Van, whatever his name is. So at the end of the game, he's been reporting all day, and then at the end of the game, he starts talking about that game. How is that scripted? How does that work? Because it's kind of like recapping.
When you're at a live event, it's a little bit different. But you have producers, production assistants. For example, even when I was live, when I was doing SportsCenter, sometimes games ended while I was on the air, so I was not able to write that. We had production assistants who would look at a game, cut 4 highlights, and then throw a script at us. So he's probably getting handed scripts.
Okay.
While he's live on the air.
And is he reading that off a teleprompter, or is it kind of like?
Yes.
Got you. Okay.
He is.
Okay.
Now the guy, if he was just out of game, that's not the case. And he may be taking notes as he goes, but they have to tell him what highlights are there. They can't just guess as they see them. They're written down. Now we all have a style. We all have a different style that we do play-by-play, or not play-by-play, that we do highlights. And so most of the time you're lucky. The games end before you go on. A production assistant will hand you a script and say, here are the highlights I cut. And then you get to write it in your own words.
Okay. I did not know that much writing went into that, but it makes sense though. It makes sense.
And then if you're lucky, if you're going to do a package like a feature on somebody, of course you have to write it. You have to know what the interviews were, and you've got to know what the B-roll, which means the video that goes with it, and you have to write and connect those things together. It's like a marvelous puzzle. I loved that part.
Wow. How much time is put into that before your show each day?
They come in maybe 4 or 5 hours ahead of time.
Okay. So
maybe more. Maybe 6. It just depends. In local stations, I mean, we do the same thing. In local stations where you might do 2 shows a night, like if you did the 6 and 11 on the local news, or the 5 and 10 like we do it here in Arizona, you come in at 2 or 3 in the afternoon to get those started.
Okay. So
and it's still always hair-raising scramble to slide onto the set with your hair on fire. I'm going to die a little early from the stress of that, I'm pretty sure.
Oh my God. Yeah, that sounds stressful. I mean, so it's definitely a full day's work. It's a full day of work.
Oh gosh, yes, it is.
Because I mean, to us, it seems like, they just go on air, they're reading teleprompter, or it's just, the statistician is giving them information and they just going off the fly. That's what it seems like. And it's like,
No,
okay, go
and
ahead.
when you hear guys like the guys that do color, like you're doing a football game, people are constantly giving them facts and statistics, so they have something to say.
Okay.
And and then you got a commercial break, and they come back, and you're suddenly talking about some guy who did something, right before the break, and suddenly they have all this information. Production assistants, PAs, are handing them stuff for the whole game. But again, when you're doing play-by-play in color, that is not scripted per se. Anything you see with an anchor desk is, because here's the deal. If the director doesn't know what's coming, how does he or she know to bring up the video, or to bring up a score, or to
Right.
bring up a sound on tape? They won't know unless you tell them where to do it. So it's all mapped out.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's blowing my mind though. I never knew. But that's why you're
I used to
here. I
love,
love it.
I would meet people in bars, and they'd go, "Oh man, I'd love your job. That would be great." And I'm thinking, you couldn't handle it, because there's so much involved in all of it, and pieces fall apart all the time. I've been live on the set, like on a local station where I've got 3.5 minutes to fill, and I'm talking and doing something like a highlight or something. They're yelling in my ear to cut a minute out of my show live on the air because something happened. So it's very stressful. That's probably why a lot of people on TV drink a lot, because it's stressful.
Jesus. I did not know that. But it does make absolute sense that you have to write. But I did not
Yeah.
know you guys show up at 3 o'clock for what, a 8 o'clock show? So you're
I
there. You
For local, like when I did 6 and 11 local kind of things, I showed up at 3 in the afternoon. And at ESPN, I did overnight. So I did the one that was like 11 o'clock in LA. And I went to work at 6 o'clock at night. And I
Jeez.
got home at 4 o'clock in the morning.
How many nights a week?
5.
Jesus.
You,
Yeah, that's
you don't
a
ever see sunlight.
that's a lot. How long were you at ESPN?
2 years. And
Uh,
yeah, it was. I, I suppose you want me to tell some ESPN stories, so I will.
Hold on.
Um,
Let's jump to this clip and then we're gonna come back
okay.
to them stories. I want people to see you in action and we'll come back. Let's get it.
I
Oh,
love it though.
memories.
Huh?
Memories.
Memories. All right, let's hear a story. Let's get an
Okay,
ESPN story.
I explained that women weren't very welcome. Okay, they made us feel unwelcome in many ways. One good example is I was live on the set one night. Are you a baseball fan?
No.
Okay, well, oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm live on the set, and there is a production assistant. Now, production assistants at ESPN are like 21, just out of college, desperate to be working at ESPN. So they're kind of like slave labor in a way. And
Mhm.
this kid comes running in and throws me a highlight, and the red camera light went on, and I look down and I go, "Oh, we're going to go to Wrigley Field." And the first shot, it says, "A fan is hit with a foul tip in the front row." And here comes this screaming line drive that just beans the guy, knocks him down, right? Well,
Mhm.
I said it, but I knew it was wrong instantly. It was not possible for him to be hit with a foul tip. But I didn't have time to fix it. So I continued on, did the highlights. And then after every SportsCenter, there's a thing called a post-mortem. And that means everybody involved in the show goes to a conference room. We sit around this big table and we discuss what went well, what went poorly, and what can we do better in the future. And so I raised my hand and I pointed to the production assistant. I went, "Rich, we need to talk about that first play." He said, "Where the guy got hit with a foul tip in the front row?" I said, "Yes, that's not possible. You can't be hit with a foul tip. A foul tip is a ball that goes from the bat to the catcher's glove and is caught. It's a strike, but it's a live ball. So if I've got a guy stealing home, he can do that and they can make a play on it. A foul ball is a dead ball that goes out of play.
Yeah.
Dead ball. If he's stealing home, I got to send him back to third." I said, "They're two totally different things." And he stood up. He goes, "You're nothing but a picky bitch." And I said, "No, I'm an umpire. And some people know I'm an umpire, and I'm embarrassed to make that kind of mistake." And the producer said, "Is it really that big a deal?" I said, "Yes, it's that big a deal. It's a fundamental a baseball rule that we got wrong, and it came out of my mouth.
Right.
Well,
For
the next
ESPN.
the next day I got called into my boss's office and ordered to apologize to Rich because I hurt his feelings.
Because you were a
I'm
woman.
like, well, I probably. But
Because
I'm
you're
thinking,
a
if
woman.
you hired me to talk about sports, don't you want me to know about sports? And there was another one. There was a guy there named Howie. And I didn't know what he was just always wandering around the newsroom. I had no idea who he was because no one told me. And I learned that he was the stats guru. He knew everything about sports in the history of the planet. You could ask him anything. You know, when was the last time the Jets won by 5 points in the snow? He could tell you that, or he'd find it pretty quickly. And so I never utilized his talent. And remember, this is before the internet. The internet was just coming in. So we didn't have access to every bit of information. So I was under the gun one night. I had not too long to get on the set. He walked by my desk going, Howie. And I asked him the question. Don't remember what it was. And he gave me the information. I went, thank you. And I went on the set, used the information, got called into my boss's office. He said, why did you say that on the air? I said, well, because it was part of my script. And I didn't want to throw Howie under the bus thinking that he'd made an error.
Yeah.
But then I saw him standing in the doorway. And I said, look, Howie gave me the information right before I went on. And he looked at me. He said, I never told her anything.
Are you serious?
Yep.
But was the information incorrect?
Yes. But he swore he didn't tell me that I got it somewhere else. So then now I'm in a position where I can't utilize the guy that is the stats guru. So it was that kind of stuff, you know, that
That's
wasn't fun.
I would have gotten up out of there quickly.
Well, you know, the problem is that my contract was not renewed. I say that as I was fired. My partner, he says, no, your contract wasn't renewed. I said, it's the same thing. And the bottom line, I was pushing 40. I was 38 years old. And the problem with women in sports is that sports is geared to a target audience of 18 to 34-year-old males generally. And once we're over 35, they don't think they're looking at us anymore. So I basically, you know, here I'd work for 4 TV stations. I briefly worked for the Phoenix Suns. I was their studio host for 2 years after that, but that was part-time work. And then I couldn't get a job anywhere. I was 40 and too old to be in TV. I wasn't pretty enough in front of the camera.
Ageism.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because I had 2 little girls in my class at ASU, and they were like, well, when you went to different stations, did they tell you how to cut your hair or do your makeup or change your clothes? I said, of course they did. I said, they did at every single station. They sent me to a consultant who would say, I hate your hair, I hate your jewelry, I hate your makeup, I hate your clothes. And they change it. And they said, and you did? I said, of course I did. It's part of being in a visual medium. And, but you know, once you're old, and I refuse to cut my face. I'm not going to have plastic surgery.
They asked for that?
Well, they don't ask for it, but you know.
Well, it's suggested without being said, right? Because it's like, we want beauty. We want you.
We want young.
Yeah,
and I'll give you what it really came home to me when I came back to Phoenix. I was in the middle of a divorce or getting a divorce, and I was in debt because I had no money, and I was staying with a friend who took me and my 2 dogs and 4 cats, and I was in bad shape. I couldn't get a job. And so I saw that they were opening a new sports bar, and they said they need a bartender. So I went scurrying over there and marched up to the manager, figuring this will be great. I worked in the restaurant business for 5 years, and I said, look, sir, I can entertain your patrons, whether they're sober or not, if you want to talk sports, and I make a great cocktail. And he looked me up and down, and he said, I don't think so. And at that point, I realized he was looking for some 20-something girl in a short skirt and push-up bra. And I'm pushing 40, and that wasn't what he wanted.
It's sad out here. It's sad. It's so sad.
Oh, I felt so sorry for me. I did.
It's sad, man.
Yeah.
It really is. Ugh. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
don't be, because it changed my life in so many ways, and I wouldn't have stayed in TV another minute had I known how things were going to work out.
Okay. All right. Well, everything's, you know, it's how it's supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be. How about that? Well, let's say that.
Well, I believe that because,
Yeah.
I came back to Phoenix, couldn't get a job. I said, was in debt. And the only skill anybody would pay me for was officiating. We have year-round amateur baseball here, everything from little league to men's leagues. We have football. We have Pop Warner all the way to high school and adult leagues. And I went from being on ESPN on SportsCenter to calling Pop Warner football games. And I didn't want to see anybody I knew. I was embarrassed. I was afraid they'd say, so what are you doing now? And I'm like, yeah, I'm calling Little League. But that was all that was the only skill anybody would pay me for. So I was depressed. I mean, I seriously struggled for several years doing nothing but feeling sorry for me.
But did you find freedom in that though?
I didn't. Oh, it took me a while, and here a couple things happened. First, I ended up being baseball partners with this man that I met. We just happened, umpires sometimes get to games and we don't know who our partners are going to be for the game. Mm-hmm. And there was this man, and he had a profound limp, white beard, white hair, good looking, big guy. And turns out he was a Vietnam vet. And Don and I became partners, and baseball partners. And we would work 4 or 5 nights a week. We might do double headers. And I don't know if you've ever been to kids baseball or high school baseball, but the umpires get dressed in the parking lot, right? We pull our folding chairs out of the back of the car. We get dressed out there. And if it's a double header, we go and drink some water and hang out and do the next game. It's like a whole event. And so Don and I became best friends. And Don had been special forces in Vietnam. He was a hero. I mean, he had a wall of medals and was shot and ended up with Agent Orange poisoning and all that entails. And his life, we would go to games and I would whine about how miserable my life was. No one will put me in TV anymore. My husband's a drunk. I'm in debt. Oh, poor me. And Don never complained. Never. He told me how beautiful Vietnam was and how the people were beautiful. And then he'd tell me horrendous stories about things that happened to him. But he never complained. And somewhere along the line, a light bulb went off in my head and went, I'm an ass. I'm worried about all these things that aren't the least bit important. Mm-hmm. And and I thought, okay, well, I'm kind of a jerk. And then other people started saying, you should be a teacher. And I said, I don't want to be a teacher. And they said, yeah, but you've worked with kids all these years as an official. You'd be a great teacher. So at 42, I went back to college and got my teaching degree. And I ended up teaching in a Title I school. Title I means, of course, 75% of the kids live in poverty. Now, I came from a middle-class family where both my parents had college degrees, even my mother, who was a reporter in the 1940s. So, of course I went to college, and I didn't live in the kind of situations my students did. And I knew nothing about it. I had kids who were neglected and abused, and there was drug and alcohol abuse and gangs, and it was crazy. I went in there and I was lucky. They hired me in a magnet program where I taught television production. The kids were supposed to do TV shows. And this early on in the year, the kids didn't do their jobs and I just raked them over the coals. I was so pissed. And in the middle of me being angry at all the kids for not doing their work, one little girl stood up and she said, we don't like you, we're leaving. And every kid in my class left.
What?
And I swear, every kid got up and left, and I stood in front of that empty classroom and I cried. Okay,
What?
I cried, and I didn't know what to do. I was so shocked because I really, in my heart, I wanted to help them. I wanted them to be successful, and you can't be successful if you're late, right? You got to be on time. You got to do your homework. You got to get your reports done. So another teacher took me aside. And she goes, have you ever considered being nicer? Oh. I said, nicer? I said, there's no nice on a football field. There's no nice in the newsroom. She said, these are kids. I said, I know, and I'm trying to help them be successful adults. She said, you need to be nicer. And so I thought about that, but I didn't do anything about it till I went to a class one day, and this kid was late every day, about 14 years old. And I took him out and I started giving him shit because I said, you can't be late. You'll never be successful. Punctuality is so important. You can't walk into class 20 minutes late. And the kid looked at his shoes and he went, I'm so sorry, Miss Montgomery, but I slept on my uncle's couch last night, and I didn't know the bus system, and I never know where I'm sleeping. And my mouth dropped open, and I realized I'm talking to a 14-year-old kid who's homeless. And I realized I'm the jerk, and I needed to be nicer. And from that point on, I started looking at my kids, my students, as school is very important, of course. But if a kid hasn't eaten for 2 days, how are they going to do their homework?
Yeah.
Right. If a
Yeah.
kid hasn't had a bath or shower, or is being neglected or abused, so I made it my mission to get to know as many of them as I could, and to determine what they're dealing with before I start jumping their shit about
Yeah.
not getting schoolwork done. Because if you're hungry, your homework isn't important.
At all. I mean, you gotta
Yeah,
commend them for just showing up,
I did.
for the effort,
I had a little girl, and I only did this once. And here's the thing: I thought I was going to teach a couple years, then someone would hire me to be in TV again. I taught at that school for 20 years,
But I'm pretty
and
sure
yeah, and you have to look. Now, I held my kids to high standards. I did, but for example, I had a 14-year-old girl who had a brain tumor, and she had it removed, and so she had brain damage, and she struggled getting. She had no short-term memory whatsoever. And so you could say, you need to do this assignment. I would explain it completely. She'd walk away and come back 5 minutes later, completely in tears, because she forgot what I told her. I
mm,
got called to a meeting with some other teachers, and one math teacher said she can't do her math, and the English teacher said she can't do the proper sentence. I went, you know what? She gets here. She gets to school every day. She's dressed. She wants desperately to learn. And at the end of the semester, I gave her an A. Because she did everything she could possibly do. And
yeah.
eventually they put her in a special school for her. I think I never did that to anybody else, but you have to understand the situation a kid is dealing with. And
Yeah.
whether that means they're having problems at home. We had 400 kids in foster care, okay, which can be a nightmare. So if I don't understand the
400?
things, how can I help them?
400 kids in foster care?
Yeah, I think that's how many we had. It was just crazy. Yeah. So, and that comes with its own sets of horrors in a way. But
Yeah.
I just decided that I was doing it all wrong. And honestly, I probably had 2,000 students over the course of my teaching career, and I think half of them hate me and half of them love me. There doesn't seem to be anybody in the middle.
But you were trying to do the right thing, so that's all that
I
matters.
did eventually, yeah. After that first year or two, I realized I was going about it all wrong, and
But
that
even
I need.
then though, your heart was in the right place, just wrong approach.
Yeah, well, it was, but my attitude was the outside world is hard. It's so hard. TV was a very, very difficult job. Certainly, officiating is a nightmare job. I mean, I've had my tires knifed and police escorts to my car more than once. Um,
Jesus.
yeah,
You
so
are
I
nuts.
was I was used, and I've had men who didn't think I belonged in a locker room or doing a sports report anywhere. So I had to fight all the time, and my thought was the kids are going to have to fight all the time. So I want to help them to be strong, and I
Yeah.
didn't do it the right way.
Well, it turned out right in the end, right? It turned out well.
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure you made them better people, better citizens, better human beings.
I don't know.
Oh God. Let's talk about your books. So you got Your Forgotten Sons. That's the latest one, right? That's the latest.
Yes,
Let's talk
Your
about that.
Forgotten. Yeah, that is quite a departure. It may be shock some of your listeners that I don't write about sports at all. I'm still a news junkie. I read the newspaper every day, and sometimes hear stories that just sound like I want to know more about them. I have
Yeah.
an insatiable sense of curiosity. And so I, over the years, wrote 5 novels that all take place in Arizona, but with on different things. It might be child abuse. It might be domestic violence. It's our wild horse problem. We have too many wild horses. It's children in religious cults. I've written about a lot of different things like that. In this case, it's entirely different. Your Forgotten Sons came to me through one of my best friends, and she called me. She's from Georgia, Columbus, Georgia. She worked at the first station I worked at. And she called me and she said, I need you to go to Baltimore because she said, I have a tumor wrapped around my spinal cord and
Oh wow.
they're going to remove it and I could end up paralyzed from the waist down. And I need you to come to be my healthcare power of attorney. And I said, absolutely. And I flew to Baltimore to Johns Hopkins Hospital. And the night before the surgery, she hands me this plastic bag, this Ziploc bag full of 75-year-old letters. And she said, these are from my Uncle Bud. And no matter what happens to me, I want you to promise that you will write Bud's story. And of course, I wanted her to feel better. So I said, yes, I'll write the story. Now, Regina walked out of that hospital. So she was okay in the end. But I had made this promise to write about her uncle. Now, her uncle, who's Sergeant Bud Richardville, was in the Graves Registration Service. Do you know what those soldiers do?
Mm-mm.
They're the ones that locate, identify, and bury the dead. So I took those letters and I followed Bud from Normandy to the Battle of the Bulge to Czechoslovakia with Patton. And his job, they followed behind all the battles, and their job was to locate soldiers and identify them. And if you go to Normandy today, you've probably seen pictures of the beautiful cemetery. Well, Bud and his men built that.
Oh.
And the problem was, if you think now it was very important that they did this job because certainly first when we on D-Day, 10,000 people died, both Allies and Germans. They had to be buried really fast because it's a health hazard, but also it's for morale. The Allies would funnel 186,000 soldiers through the Normandy beaches. You can't have bodies lying around. So these guys, that was their whole job, and no one wanted to do it. It's a horrible job. Mm-hmm. They tried to get out of it. They all wanted to be real soldiers. And so it was a very, very difficult situation. And I have very few people that have ever, they say to me, I never thought about where the bodies go. Nobody does. Nobody does. And I found so little information about what they might have done and how their lives were. And then I found one book it's called Crosses in the Wind. It was written by a lieutenant colonel. He was a captain when he was in the Graves Registration Service. Joseph Schoeman was his name. And he wrote a book about what the kinds of things they had to do. And it is a necessarily gruesome book. But it's about Bud and his life, and also about his wife, and maybe there was another woman in there. So it's also got some romance in it. Okay. But it's very difficult.
Where can people pick this book up at?
Oh, anywhere. You can buy it anywhere.
Okay. All right. And how long have you been writing?
When I first left ESPN, I had to find something to do. I was horribly bored. I had nothing to do at first. My agent kept saying, we'll get you a job, but I didn't. So I collaborated with my ex-husband, who was a minor league umpire, and he told me about major league umpires who were gambling on their own games.
Yeah.
And this was before gambling became like a really cool thing. It's great. You can all do it. And so it was a problem. And I took the story to ESPN, and then they didn't renew my contract. And he always believed I was blackballed because of that story. But anyway, wow. I wrote that book never went anywhere. I've written 9 books. 6 are traditionally published, meaning they were paid for by publishers. Yeah. And I really like to write. It's at this point I'm retired from just about everything. Mm-hmm. So writing is what I do now.
Okay. So I got one last question for you, Ann. And it could be whatever, but I always have to ask this to every guest. It's a self-analysis, and I don't know what you want to do or what you're doing or whatever, but self-analysis. What's one thing that you think that you could be doing better or more of to get you to where you desire or you want to be? Whatever that may be.
What could I do? More physical therapy, Honestly, I look back on my life. If I got hit by a meteor, which is my way I'd like to die, a giant rock from space, just vaporized, I think that'd be cool. I have missed out on very little. I have pretty much done all the things I said I would do. Now, would I like an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay? Yeah, I would, but I'm not sure that'll ever happen. I think the point is I tried really hard to succeed at things, I didn't always get what I wanted. I wanted to be the first woman official in the NFL. I was too old by the time they were doing that. So I think I know it's an overused trope maybe, but as Arthur Ashe said, it's the journey,
Yeah.
not necessarily, just trying is success.
Yeah.
You may not get everything you want, but I have very few regrets, almost none. Um, and so I like to write books. I'm doing that. I'm a scuba diver. I love to do that. And I can't think of anything specific.
Hold on, Ann. That's not the final question. We have to talk about those sharks, remember?
The sharks.
We got to talk about the sharks and then we'll wrap it up. Please tell me
Okay.
more about the sharks. So, just like that
All right.
photo that you had over there on your little mantle over there, you're down there scuba diving with sharks.
Yes. And
I'm a
they're lovely.
Pisces. I love animals. I love fish and all that, but I do have a phobia of those sharks. Like, I've swam with sharks, but not that type of shark that I saw in that picture. Not that.
Most people will see a nurse shark, which are like the kittens of the shark world.
They were a little
But
bigger
the
than
bottom line,
they were a little bigger
sharks,
than nurse sharks though. But go ahead though. Tell me about these
um,
sharks.
sharks, if a shark bites a human, it's a mistake. We are not on their, we're not on their menu generally. What they do is they see surfers or swimmers on the surface who look like dying seals, because creatures that are healthy in the sea aren't all moving around. They swim very beautifully and gently. When something is doing that, it's dying. And sharks are very opportunistic, and they want to go for something that they don't have to fight. So when they see a surfer up there paddling, they think it's a dying seal. And they go up and they bite it and they go, yuck, and they spit us out because we don't taste good.
Mm,
So, and
okay.
let's face it, humans kill like 100 million sharks a year. Do you know how many people die from shark bites every year in the world?
How many?
10.
Wow.
10. And mostly it's because they get bitten, they get released, and then they bleed out. Do you know how many people die from falling coconuts?
How many?
100, 150 maybe. Every year people die from falling coconuts, but we don't go running around going, oh my God, a palm tree. We don't do that. So if you're going to swim with sharks, you swim gently. You keep your fingers and hands in. If you notice in that picture, my hands are on my legs.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't want to put your fingers out because they think that's a little fish. And you respect the fact that you're in their world. And I've maybe been with sharks a dozen times, maybe more. Never had a single problem. Even with bull sharks, which are big nasty sharks, which are the original sharks that the story about Jaws was. That was like in the 1930s. A shark swam up a river, ate like 3 New Jersey people, and swam back out to sea. Bull sharks go up into fresh water to have their babies, and they're the ones that usually bite people because they don't expect them to be in a river. So when Peter Bentley, I think, was that his name, wrote Jaws, he changed the story and made it a great white, but bulls are meaner.
Wow. And they're just being protective, right? As far as
Well, when a bull goes up, I don't know why they ate those people. 3 people disappeared. Whether they just dragged them and they floated out to sea, I don't know. But sharks generally have no interest in biting people. We are not tasty. Did you ever put your drink down and then you went and picked it up and it was the wrong drink? Like that.
yeah.
It's kind of like that. They bite us and go, ugh, we're horrible.
Yeah, like,
But they really, they
that's
don't
not
want to eat us. They don't want to eat us. It's just a mistaken identity.
okay. Got you. All right, that helps. That helps. I don't know, but that helps. Take some time. It'll take some time, Ann. But I appreciate that. No, I don't know. I might go swim with some sharks again. It was fun.
I hope you do.
Yeah, it was fun. I can't remember what they were. They weren't nurse sharks. They were a little bit bigger, but it was fun. It was in the Bahamas, and there was a bunch of them. But
Probably Caribbean reef sharks.
something, I don't know. But they didn't mess with me. They didn't bother me. I was cool. So yeah. But I appreciate that insight. I really do. It helps. That does help. I know how to protect myself now, though. Don't look like a dying seal or don't put my hands out.
And remember, they don't come at you straight. They come up underneath you. So
Mm,
if you get afraid, just drop to the bottom.
okay.
They're not going to come down to get you. They swim underneath you for the most part and come up. So don't panic. They really don't want to bother you. And if they come near you, it's because divers sometimes feed them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Keep your fingers in. Yeah.
Got you. Okay. I appreciate that. Well, it has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. Delightful, I shall say. And I loved your stories, your history, and the insight with broadcasting. Didn't know a lot of that stuff, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know that stuff. So thank you so much. This is what this show is built on. People like yourself coming on, being transparent, and just giving us the stories, giving us the juice, the good stuff. You know what I mean? So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And continue enjoying your life. Continue
I will
being
do my
free.
best.
Yes, continue being free. Enjoy St. Croix, all that, and just keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for real.
Thank you, Cool.
Yes, yes, yes. Everybody, you know where I'm at every Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here, kicking it with someone cool like Ann Montgomery. We really kicked it tonight. Thank you so much, Ann. Thank everybody for tuning in. If you're watching it live, you're watching on the replay. Thank you so much. Can't do it without you. Until next time, peace and love. I appreciate you, Ann.
Thank you, Cool.
We're out of here.